This is my Bullet 350. I bought it about 15 years ago. It's an '07 plate. It's been through a lot of incarnations over the years, but I've most recently made it into a trials bike for doing long distance trials. So as you can see, it differs quite a lot from standard, so I thought I would do a little walk around and show you what I've done to it in an attempt to make it better off-road. Start at the front. So I've got a half-width hub, old style Bullet hub. The twin leading drum was never all that good and doesn't work backwards very well, so if you have to stop on a steep incline, this at least works somewhat. I've laced a 21-inch rim onto it, and obviously we've got a trials tyre. It's using the standard Enfield forks. They're pretty much unmodified. I put new springs in because they were getting very tired. I've made my own mudguard stays on the whole. I think we're still using the original middle ones, but just bent those up and brazed some ends on them. Also we've got fork gaiters, and I cut down the original fork shrouds just to give somewhere for the gaiters to go into. That's my race number plate. It's got the standard casquette on there. The stickers are from many years of going to dragon rallies. So yeah, that's those. Move up to the controls. I've got a set of old Enfield desert bars on there. These are C90 switch gear, just because I like them. They're alloy, they work quite well. I'm using a GPZ 500S clutch that gives us a lot more pull. These things really struggle with clutch stack separation, so that makes a huge difference to the clutch. Come across, I just put a high beam indicator on there. Obviously I've got my bomb-proof watch and a little homemade roadbook holder for the directions on the trials. We'll move across. We've got another GPZ 500S clutch lever. I flipped this one upside down and I'm using the clutch idiot switch as a brake light switch. That works really well. We've got an emergency stop with a lanyard on it for if myself and the bike part company, and ammo throttle twist grip. I've got extra fat hand grips on. I've got big hands and it reduces fatigue quite a lot. If we move around, one obvious change is the tank. That was actually from India. It's a steel tank, but it's a copy of the Works Trials tanks that were made in alloy. I couldn't justify the expense of that. We've got a Hitchcock's Motorcycles exhaust system, just a little trials exhaust system. We've got it tucked away neatly. It's a proper leg burner. You can see I've got quite a lot of waterproof trousers stuck to that. The wrap is supposed to help reduce that, but it's it is what it is. Little go faster collar on there. Engine itself, certainly at the top end, it's got some Samrat rockers on there. It's one of Hitchcock's ported and tuned heads. I've kept the original mic carb. I really couldn't get away with the ammo at all, especially the slow running. Doesn't seem very nice. It fires up really nicely on this carb. It would stand a bigger carb, but for the trials use, actually under carbing it seems to work quite well. It picks up nicely, idles nicely. It's got an alloy barrel there, and I have a Meteor Minor piston in there, which bumps the compression slightly, not too much. If we go down, this is the Hitchcock's Motorcycles scavenge pump pressure relief system that stops it going over pressure and damaging the oil pumps. That also lets me run the Samrat rockers as pressure fed. I did try higher flow oil pumps. It just seemed to burn more oil. It's getting adequate oil through the engine, so not too concerned about that. If I go into the frame, that's completely unmodified. I've painted it with Tractol Massey Ferguson grey, just in the style of trials bikes having a coloured frame. I thought that would be neat. Now I mentioned the front mudguard is just an off-the-shelf plastic front mudguard. I'm trying to keep weight down as much as possible. This is a heavy bike, it's not ideally suited for trials, so yeah. If we move down, I've got a fairly chunky bash plate there, just a big bit of alloy, some home fabricated brackets. Made these little wing things to try and deflect any stones away from this vulnerable oil filter. Seems to be working so far. Gear lever has modified itself into a slightly bent in position, but that seems to work okay. You have to reach forward to it from the foot pegs, but that seems to be how they did it back in the day. Moving back to the gearbox, it's the Albion 4-speed. I've fitted the Hitchcock's Motorcycles trials gearing in this, so it's gears 1, 2 and 3 very low. 4th is still 1 to 1, but as we move back we'll see that the actual overall gearing has been altered as well. Foot pegs would normally be attached through here. I've moved them up and back. This is just using the standard pillion peg mounts. It's got them in exactly the right place near the swing arm pivot, and some Sammy Miller foot pegs on there. I was dubious as to whether these would hold on because it's just a taper fit, but they seem to work really, really well, so no complaints there. Moving up, we've got the little sprung Lycett style trials saddle. The idea is not to sit on the saddle anyway, so I might put something a bit lower profile on it at some point, but that does keep the bumps out the way. Little extra fuel supply there for the longer distance trials, and a very lightweight back end. I've taken the whole original rear subframe off and replaced it with this lightweight bracket and a plastic mudguard. That's saved a huge amount of weight. Yep, so we get to the rear wheel. It's a standard rear wheel. I've moved the Speedo drive to the back wheel because the half-width hub on the front won't accept that. Managed to squeeze a 4-inch trials tyre in there. It's pretty tight for space, but we got it, so that will hopefully give me a bit more grip. Old BSA style tail light. It's a bit wonky, but it works. I've got overstandard shocks on it. This caused a lot of mayhem because it's altered the angle that the rear brake system sits at. It was camming on with the when you went over a bump, and I broke two rear brake plates and a swing arm actually. So I've converted that to a cable operation, and it comes back up here, and then there's a home-brewed lever. That seems to work pretty well. Yeah, and we've got the old style brake light switch there, so that works pretty well. Little tool bag, which is lighter than the old steel boxes. I have put lifting handles on both sides. That's really comes into its own if you're trying to drag this thing out of a ditch, which happens all too often when I'm riding. I'm going to replace these shocks. They're a bit stiff. I'm going to put some proper trials shocks on it, so it's a bit more boingy. Yeah, if we keep going round, I've retained the original distributor and point system on it. I completely rewired the bike, so most of the wiring is inside this T-caddy. Come back, I'm running a Japanese style regulator rectifier, and there's an upgraded ignition coil in there somewhere. So I've retained the AC/DC lighting system. That took a bit of fiddling with relays to make the headlamp work, because these switches aren't wired to take two different current systems, but we've got that. I'm using the DC to trigger the AC lighting, and that seems to work pretty well. Right, I'll fire it up and you can hear it running, hopefully. And that's about as good as I'm going to get with positioning you. So I do need to flip up the foot peg to work the kickstart. So we've got fuel on, ignition on, decompressor lever just on under my left fingers, where it's handy if I need to pull it going down a steep hill, and we'll get it to the sweet spot and it should fire up. Of course it'll embarrass me. Right, a little bit of choke. Too much choke, that was the problem. Should go next time. Didn't mean to put the choke on, the engine's hot, so. As you can see, the mid carb gives me a really stable idle, so that works pretty well. Yeah, and we've got classic side lights, and then the AC powered headlight, which works pretty well. Yeah, so quite pleased with it. You'll see it's smoking quite a lot. That happens if you idle it on the side stand for a long time. Doesn't like being canted over like that. So yeah, that's my bullet. There's my decompressor lever there. Yeah, so hopefully once I've learned to ride the thing in wet slimy mud, we'll do a bit better on the trials this year. I realised there's a couple of things I forgot to mention on my way round, so I'll catch up with those now. You'll see this copper pipe with a spigot there. These engines, the later ones, didn't have the breather, the crankcase breather built in there. They actually breathed through the oil tank. It didn't work very well as a breather, and it tended to lose quite a lot of oil out of it as well. So yeah, I literally drilled a hole in the crankcase, fitted a spigot and some copper pipe coming up. That then attaches to a diesel non-return valve, so it's designed as a fuel ball valve, so it gives us the one-way flow, and I've got a pipe coming all the way back, and that goes off the back of the rear mudguard. That works remarkably well. The other thing I forgot to mention was I've fitted a much more rigid Crusader Sport brake plate. That also works very well. It took a bit of modifying to make some new spacers and a new snail cam that was a bit thinner to fit everything in, but that works very well. I've got the big suit plate rear sprocket on as well. That is built onto a turn down sprocket and hub casting, and then it's held on with a series of countersunk bolts round the outside. I had real problems with this this processing off. These kept on doing themselves, but I've now fitted it with Nordlock spring washers, which you may be able to see if I come round, possibly. Tricky to see, but it has not moved since I used those. They're a remarkable piece of equipment, and I will be using them more on various parts of the bike. Because I have the increased swing arm travel and I've altered the angle it sits at, I've had to fit a chain tensioner. That took a bit of fiddling. I managed to find a clamp that's designed to hold roll cages on beach buggies, and that's fitted on quite nicely. I've also got a tension roller built onto the end of the brake lever pivot, and that's just a nylon roller. It just helps guide it onto the front sprocket, and the sort of classic trial style alloy chain guard to keep the worst of the muck and mud off the chain. I've also, you'll probably not be able to see it, but I've got made a nylon chain slider to go on top of the swing arm to stop the chain eating its way in. I do have an 18 tooth sprocket on the front. That was more to give me a wider sort of spread on the chain. That combined with the suit plate sprocket and the trials gearing gives me some really nice walking pace or less speed in first gear, but it will still do 50 on the road, because fourth gear is straight through. Oh, and yeah, I had to make a longer side stand, just a piece of bent steel tube, because it's sitting so much higher off the ground than standard.